What's going on, guys? I just wanted to give you a real quick reaction to Michael Silver's latest article with The Athletic discussing what the Chargers are thinking about doing with Rashawn Slater. I'm getting very frustrated because we're seeing the same rhetoric again and again and again anytime the Chargers are questioning what to do with somebody on their offensive line. We saw this happen with Jim Harbaugh originally took over as the head coach and Joe Ortiz as the general manager, and they didn't know what to do with Jordan McFadden. Jordan McFadden was a tackle, was drafted as a tackle, but they assumed he was going to be transitioning to guard because of some length issues with his arms. And then he also kind of played fullback, which is kind of funny, with under Kellen Moore. But when Jim Harbaugh took over, they started floating the idea when they didn't have a spot for him on the starting lineup and didn't know if he was even going to cut it as a depth piece. They started floating him out there as a potential guy that could take over at center. We saw the same thing happen when Zion when there were a lot of questions as to whether or not they would pick up Zion's fifth-year option. For those of us watching closely, we knew it was pretty unlikely they were going to because Zion hadn't quite lived up to what that fifth-year option would cost, $23 million next year. So that was likely being thrown by the wayside. They could have potentially looked to upgrade the guard position. As you know, they did get Becton, but we were wondering if they were going to get another guard to potentially compete with Zion because interior pressure was such a problem last year. Instead, we started getting that rhetoric again that Zion might be moved to center, that Zion was going to be competing with Bradley Bozeman at center. And it's been a very frustrating experience, I think, for those of us that have wanted to see the center position get upgraded. A lot of our success in the past with the Chargers was predicated upon having a center that took, responsibility off of the quarterback, able to call out the protection adjustments and things of that nature, and provide a stout presence in the interior of the line. It was Nick Hardwick originally, but the last two playoff runs we really went on were with Mike Pouncey after he had a healthy full season, and Corey Linsley with him having a healthy full season and both of them being able to play in the playoffs as well. Before that, the last time we actually had a little bit of playoff success or had made it to the playoffs was when Nick Hardwick was at center. So getting a guy that is going to be stout in the interior is probably the biggest improvement they could make on this offense at this point. Bradley Bozeman has been a stopgap. That's it. But once again, we are floating around this idea with Rashawn Slater that now that Joe Alt is showing that he's probably our best option at left tackle, injury or no injury, that instead of pushing Slater to right tackle, there's some people in the Chargers, some of the Chargers decision makers believe that there's a scenario, according to Michael Silver, in which Slater could be shifted to center with a viable chance to excel in a new position. Guys, if Rashawn Slater, who signed a $28.5 million a year contract, were to play center, he would be breaking the center price ceiling by $10.5 million. That is insane. We have seen that the difference between the left tackle market and the right tackle market is just null and void now. There's no real overpay over on the left-hand side and a much lesser amount going to the right-hand side. In fact, the second and third highest tackle contracts are for guys on the left side. But at center, the highest contract right now is $18 million. Tyler Linderbaum didn't get his fifth-year option exercised, not for the same reason Zion didn't. Zion didn't get it exercised because they don't know if they're going to be willing to pay him anywhere close to that $23 million a year mark. It doesn't make sense at this point. Nowhere close to that. With Linderbaum, they didn't pick it up, even though they definitely plan on making him the highest paid center next offseason because the options were $23 million. And his market is probably 19, maybe they break 20 million for the first time with centers, but it's looking more like it'll be 18.5 to 19 million a year. To pay Rashawn Slater $28.5 million a year to play center would be criminal, especially because we don't have a right tackle on the books next year. Trey Pipkins would need to be extended. They could push Jamari Sawyer out there, but that still is just creating holes because we also don't have a left guard. There's a lot of different ways we could configure the future of this line, but what makes the most sense is to put Rashawn Slater at right tackle where we have a need and his $28 million a year contract won't look like an albatross. And then, yes, go and address the center position. From a fan's perspective, every time you say Jordan McFadden could be our new center, Zion could be our new center, Rashawn Slater could be our new center, you are acknowledging that you haven't gotten us the center this team needs to really hit its ceiling. And it's just, it's teasing us at this point. So instead of talking about all these guys, all these internal options that could be a center of the future for this team, why don't you just buck up and go and get one? The Ravens might have a hard time extending Tyler Lindenbaum. They might not be able, he might go and test the free agent market because for them to hit him with the franchise tag would be the same thing as the 5th-year option. They don't want to do that. They don't want to risk him being on a $23 million deal for 1 year when A, their cap situation is not great right now, and B, that's a $5 million a year overpay right off the bat. So he might get the opportunity to test free agency. If you want to do something crazy, if you want to overpay a center, do it for a guy that will be healthy, hopefully, assuming everything goes as it currently is going and stays on track. And B, wouldn't have to learn a new position. And C, lets you move Rashawn Slater to right tackle, a position he's played before, and the position that is much harder to find replacements for. It is much harder to find an all-pro tackle than it is an all-pro center or even a above-average center. So that's my plea, Chargers front office. I think you guys are doing an incredible job. Jim Harbaugh, I love being 3-0 and sitting 3-0 in our division and with our record, just chilling on top of the AFC West. But I am hating this rumor mill you guys keep doing every offseason with the center position. Just prioritize it, please. That is my plea, guys. What do you think? Let me know what you think at the bottom. Have a great day.